All right, let's bring on our guests from Nineveh Township. Come on up. We have Ethan Straker and Stephen Straw. Let's give them a hand.
Don't stop believing. Hold on to that
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
First of all, let's give these first responders a huge hand for what they do each and every day. Thank you. Grab a seat, guys. Thank you. Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm sure you get this at home all the time, right?
Not at all. That was incredibly touching. Thank you. Sincerely.
Well, thank you both for joining us. It's Nineveh, Indiana, right? Nineveh.
Yes, sir. Nineveh.
Nineveh, Indiana. So Ethan and Stephen, when tragedy strikes, which we don't often think about, I know you two do, we're thinking about it all the time. When tragedy strikes, you're the two people we want there. And as rescue workers, you're called all the time to very difficult situations. But this past February was a little different. And maybe just walk us through what happened, what you found, and what you did to save this man's life.
Absolutely. So at 2 o'clock on February the 21st, 2022, our station received a box alarm assignment for an aircraft crash in our first due. And, you see an aircraft crash pop out. We're used to seeing, sick person, injured person, cardiac arrest, house fire, but no one had ever seen an aircraft crash actually come up there before. It's one of those things you plan for, expecting not to happen.
Had you actually ever trained for this?
We receive a very high level of training in the fire service, and we can train for incidents like this. But, how many people have a spare Cessna 178 lying around to take up to 5,000 feet and drop in a field somewhere?
I take that as a no.
It's not viable. It's not viable. Yes. But yeah, we arrived on scene. Our firehouse was 11 minutes away from the scene of the crash. So, we're out the door in 30 to 40 seconds. 11 minutes there. Obviously, we're in a fire engine that weighs 60,000 pounds, so we're not going to get there as fast as a passenger car. We arrive on scene, and this is the scene we saw. I don't know if the pictures are up there yet or not, but you'll see here in a second. We saw a small single-seater aircraft crash landed in the field adjacent to the airstrip, about 1,000 feet away from our location. So we were first on scene. We positioned our apparatus as close as we could get, but we could barely even see the wreck from the airstrip because of how far away it was.
And maybe for the audience here, because they understand 1,000 feet, but explain to them what that means for you to be 1,000 feet away from the accident, A, and B, the stuff you have to take to that accident scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the middle of February in Indiana. I'm not sure how many of you were local, but you understand it's very wet, and there was actually snow on the ground the day before this incident. So there was about the 8-inch layer of topsoil on this field was, to say politely, it was slop. It was difficult to walk through. It was pulling your boots off your feet as you were accessing it, and it was impossible to get a vehicle back there. Even the side-by-sides and the four-wheelers that we have access to couldn't even get off the concrete without being stuck. So we had to walk that 1,000 feet and portage our equipment with us. Stephen here carried medical equipment over, and myself, I carried the Halmatra Pantheon series cutters. Now that tool weighs 47 pounds. 47 pounds doesn't sound like a lot. When I tell you this was one of the most physically arduous things I've ever done, it's no word of a lie. It was incredibly difficult to get all the equipment necessary out there to perform this rescue.
And was there also a fuel leak in the plane that you had to think about at the time?
Yeah, when we came up on it, there was, on the right wing, there was a fuel leak running from the plane. And we had to mitigate that. Obviously, if the whole scene blows up, nobody's going to make it out of there in a good condition. There was also debris strewn everywhere. And like I said, the actual physical condition of the ground made this rescue even more technical than it already was.
And you mentioned the Pantheon rescue tool. What would you have used 3-4 years ago, and how would that have been different than the Pantheon?
Well, you say 3 or 4 years ago. However, we only received these tools 10 days prior to this accident
10 days
happening.
before the accident?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what would you have done 11 days prior?
We previously had a different manufacturer's tool system that we'd had since the early 2000s. My younger brother's in the audience. He's 18 years old, and the tool set we had was actually older than him prior to us getting this Halmatra series. That would have involved carrying 2 tools out there that were of equal weight to the Halmatro tools we carried, additional to about 120-pound hydraulic pump that would have had to lug across that field 1,000 feet.
Wow. So the Pantheon's a game changer to be able to get to a scene like this, but I imagine 10 days prior when you received it, you probably never thought you were going to have to walk 1,000 feet in a sloppy field in the middle and dead of winter in Indiana.
No, not at all.
Okay,
It just wasn't something we considered.
So, and Stephen, do you want to add anything to carrying all that stuff? Because I think you carried it, and Ethan's taking a little of the credit here, or who carried it?
No, he's a lot bigger
And
than
just
me.
to be honest with you, just size-wise, I'd let Ethan carry that next time.
Exactly. No, we, like he was saying, our old equipment, you're looking at hauling 220, 230 pounds of equipment out, whereas our new Halmatro equipment, you're hauling 50 pounds of equipment out. It was a game changer. Made our jobs a lot easier that day. The battery powered, we were honestly lucky to get it whenever we did. They was calling for 8 weeks whenever we ordered it. I think we got it 6 weeks later.
So they promised Harm, this is awesome. Kyle, this is awesome. They promised it 8 weeks and you got it in 6? I love that. Come on.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's always like that.
Yeah.
So all right, now, so this is an arduous task. I can't imagine taking 220 pounds across the field. And if you remember earlier, during our innovation hour, John Lavorado picked up that tool and they were taking a picture, and I think within 7 seconds, John's like, take the picture fast. Even 47 pounds is a lot. But you get to the scene, what did you find, what did you see, and what did you do to save this man's life?
Yeah, so from us accessing the airfield at first, what we saw was a plane that was just completely strewn all over a field. And this was a large field. There was wreckage everywhere. From where the plane initially touched down, we think he bounced off of the runway and then bounced into the field. That's how hard he impacted the ground at first. So over that whole distance he bounced was wreckage strewn everywhere. So we're walking up, it's almost like following a trail of Cheerios or something like that. You're like, okay, we're getting closer and closer and closer. And the pieces of wreckage are getting bigger and bigger, and the scene is becoming more apparent to us. Initially, when we arrived, I did not think this gentleman was going to be viable for a rescue. I believed he'd already perished because the amount of blood and the amount of entanglement inside of the wreck was absolutely incredible. I've never seen anything else like it in my career so far. So that's the scene we're coming up on. It's a horrific wreck. We already know this is going to be an incredibly technical rescue and an incredibly technical incident that we're the ones that have been called to mitigate. And then on top of that, as we approach the scene, we see, something as horrific and gory as what I described.
So Ethan, before you cut into this plane, you didn't know whether the victim was alive or not?
No.
Wow. All right, take us from there.
Yeah. When we did arrive at the plane wreckage, we did deem that the patient was in fact still alive. Extrication was a huge priority in this situation. However, getting the gentleman in question the medical care that he needed so badly was our first priority, first and foremost. Stephen here took the glass on one of the backside of the plane to gain patient access and began patient care immediately upon arriving at the scene. As the officer in command on that day, we have to take a step back and see the whole picture of this incident. We can't just focus on the gentleman in the plane that needs rescued or our crew members. We have to see the whole picture of the operation and understand how to quickly, effectively, and most importantly, safely mitigate the incident at hand. So Stephen was providing medical care. I was assessing the situation and figuring out what our game plan was to extricate this gentleman in a timely fashion.
So Stephen's kind of crawling through the plane and giving medical attention to the victim while you're trying to figure out how do we get them out while also watching this fuel leak and making sure we don't endanger everybody around the plane.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah, the fuel leak wasn't a huge issue, but it was obviously something that was it just added another element of difficulty to the situation at hand.
So that's your job, is to step back and really see the full picture while the team is doing their individual duties.
Yes, sir.
Wow, that is phenomenal. And then take us through how you got him out of the plane, because I understand that was not easy. And the tool may have been really key to that.
Yeah, I cannot stress enough how much easier this Halmatro Pantheon series tool made our jobs at this incident. I can't even imagine how long it would have taken us to get this gentleman out if we had a subpar battery-powered tool, or even longer if we had our old hydraulic pump-powered tool. We effected this extrication, meaning we had the gentleman out of the plane, packaged on a backboard, and on his way to the medical helicopter that was assisting us in 12 minutes. That's from us setting the air brake on the fire engine to having him to definitive care.
So you ran across that field.
As fast as I could, but like I said, it was heavy and sloppy, so.
One thing that always hits me is how do you deal with that emotional trauma when you're going to the scene, and how do you deal with that emotional trauma after the scene? And I want to ask both of you that because I'm sure it's unique.
We rely on each other. We rely on our team. We're always there. You know, Ethan can call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll pick up the phone.
How long have you two worked together?
2 years? Yeah, coming up on 2 years now.
2 years.
So that's just the time that we've spent on a company reliably together for 24 hours every third day.
And then when you come up to that scene, is it just adrenaline? So you're just trying to solve? You're not even thinking about actually what you're seeing? And I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to get a feel for that.
No, but you express it perfectly. It is adrenaline. You know, if you're responding to, you know, the area we service is about 98 square miles, and we have 4,500 people in that area. However, you know, if you live in an area that, if you've grown up in an area or lived there for a while, you know a lot of the people in your town, you know a lot of the people in your neighborhood. And there's often times that we have to respond to emergencies of people that we know personally and are a big part of our lives.
Think of that.
So when it gets to that point and you are relying on adrenaline, you're relying on your training, and you're putting aside your own needs to benefit somebody else. You know, and that was perfectly in this situation. You know, you don't get the chance to be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, this is horrific. How did this happen? None of those questions matter. All that matters is that we've been called to mitigate an emergency, and no one else is coming to do it. You know, there isn't a backup plan. Well, there is a backup plan, but we aren't the backup plan. It's our job to mitigate what's in front of us and deal with the, you know, physical and emotional toll of that after the incident's been mitigated.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for what you do. And God forbid, if I'm ever in an accident, I'd love for you guys to be on the scene because I know you'd take care of me very, very well. But thank you for what you do. It's not lost upon us what you do, what you go through, and the emotional trauma and stress, not to mention you're on call 24/7, which is something a lot of us don't have to deal with. So Ethan, Stephen, thank you so much for what you do. And we all here at Madison truly appreciate what you're doing for the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Ethan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Stephen, thank you.
Appreciate it.
what you do, man. Seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.